You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. We have an episode today that is packed to the brim. My guest is Sarah Macharia. She is a Kenyan political scientist and political economist, and she is the global coordinator for the largest and longest longitudinal study on gender in the world's media. And in Fighting Words, I take on what has happened on Super Tuesday and Super Wednesday and other super days. It's been a busy week, and we have facts on the coronavirus that answer a couple of very simple, small questions I had and couldn't find the answers to anywhere. You might have been looking for them as well. We've now got those answers. And, of course, there's Surrealism Corner. Lots of good things. So we better jump in right away inside the headlines. The Democratic candidate roster started so well, too. Women, both black and white, men of color, African American, Latino, Asian American, a gay guy, young and old from all parts of the country, beginning to look like America. Now we're down to a pair of white, straight men in their 70s. And how does this differ from almost every other presidential election, you ask? Well, more about that in Fighting Words. Still, let's try to start with some good news this week. For the first time ever, 2 women share the Pritzker Prize, the highest honor their profession, architecture, can bestow. The Dublin-based architects Yvonne Farrell and Shelley McNamara are the first time 2 women have shared the prize, which was won by Zaha Hadid, the first woman, in 2004. These 2 are praised for their sensitivity to natural elements as well as to their emphasis on collaboration. Also good news, new research by the nonprofit group Women on Boards shows a significant shift from 2016, 2017, and 2018, when 12 companies, roughly half of those who went public, did so with all-male boards. The 2020 report shows that in 2019, only 1 company went public with an all-male board. The shift toward gender parity was unexpected and thought to be the result of a number of factors, including a law passed in California in 2018 and mounting pressure from financial firms. The law, which required every public company to have at least 1 female director, that's a pretty humble request if you ask me, has had high compliance rates. 3 months after the 2019 deadline, only 4% of companies still have an all-male board. That's down from 29% of companies in the state that had all-boy boards before the law was passed. Moral legislation matters, and it can inspire more of the same. There are similar bills brewing in Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, and Illinois. And Goldman Sachs has pledged it will raise its requirement to 2 in 2021. Tokenism rampaging along. You can find the full report at 2020wob.com. Because God forbid we should get spoiled with too much good news, here's a sad antidote to that. A new report from the United States Commission on Civil Rights comes after public hearings in 2019 and a year-long investigation by that fact-finding agency. The Commission looked at why prison discipline policies often punish women in prison disproportionately and harshly for minor violations of prison rules, as compared with such punishment for incarcerated men. In 2018, NPR, National Public Radio, and the Medill School of Journalism at Northwestern University collected data from prisons across the United States, finding that women were disciplined 2 to 3 times more often and more cruelly than men for such violations, like disobeying or talking back to a corrections officer, or, in one example, 3 months in solitary for making an unauthorized call to a 10-year-old daughter. This new report confirms the findings and can be found in full at npr.org. In the latest Lo, How the Mighty Have Fallen department, Chris Matthews, longtime hardball host and bombastic commentator on MSNBC, suddenly retired live on air last Monday. Matthews, 74, was infamous for his rapid-fire questions and ceaseless interrupting of guests who were attempting to reply. But he also had a history of sexist comments and acts that he himself referenced in a somewhat slapdash apology as he angrily resigned. This was a long time coming. Only a few examples of many. In 1999, Matthews received a reprimand for, quote, inappropriate jokes and comments that he'd made about a female employee. In 2008, in his coverage of Hillary Clinton, he notoriously stated, quote, the reason she's a U.S. Senator, the reason she's a candidate for president, the reason she may be a frontrunner is her husband messed around. That's how she got to be senator from New York. She didn't win there on her merit, close quote. Then he later apologized, saying it wasn't fair to imply that Hillary's whole career depended on being a victim of an unfaithful husband. But in preparations for a 2016 interview with Clinton, Matthews joked, "Where's that Bill Cosby pill I brought with me?" and again had to apologize. Known for running his mouth and then apologizing, apparently he had exhausted his apologies. So his departure was mutual, according to leaks from the NBC executive suite. Less than a week ago, he had sparred with Elizabeth Warren over her accusations about Mike Bloomberg's non-disclosure agreements with women who complained of sexual misconduct in his company. And Me Too just keeps on keeping on, this time Moi aussi, in France, with actress Adèle Haenel leading a walkout of women from the French César Awards, the French Oscars, doing so at the bestowing of Best Director to Roman Polanski, who was convicted of statutory rape of a 13-year-old girl in 1977. And just recently, French actor Valentina Monnier accused Polanski of an extremely violent assault and rape on her back in 1975 when she was 18. The women walked out crying shame and joined protesters who had gathered outside the venue hours earlier. France's equality minister, Marlene Schiappa, had previously condemned the decision to even nominate Polanski's film, saying she found it impossible that a hall will applaud the film of a man accused of rape several times. Polanski himself shrugged off calls for a boycott of his film, but he did not attend the César Awards. And last, the recently announced deal between the United States and the Taliban has already been violated by the Taliban and denounced by the Afghan government, weak as it is. The deal included reducing the number of U.S. and allied troops, and the Taliban supposedly ensuring that they would not permit the country to again become a safe haven for terrorists. Not one mention was made of guaranteeing women's rights, general human rights, or adherence to the Afghan constitution. Furthermore, Afghan women leaders have not been permitted in the negotiations at all, a clear violation of the Women, Peace, and Security Act signed into law by Trump in 2017. This means that in territories under Taliban rule, women and girls will likely be banned from attending school, being employed outside the home, or even leaving home for a walk without a male guardian. Today, Afghan women are doctors, lawyers, police officers, and members of parliament. They comprise 27% of government workers. All this is now totally at risk. If you can take a moment to send a message to your senator and congressperson saying that you stand with Afghan women and want your representative and senator to do so too, because without these women, there is no sustainable peace. If you could do that, it would be a good thing. It's time for our first break, but if, like me, you've ever thrown a shoe at the television set and yelled back at whatever was being broadcast there, you'll be especially interested and possibly want to join in the largest advocacy initiative in the world on changing the representation of women in the media. And you'll be interested in staying alive long enough to do that, which means that you might just be interested in this little tip that I found about the coronavirus. Simple things to do that tells you washing your hands isn't just the whole story. So let's get going, because first, the way to all those things is through the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
They're calling it a pandemic now. Schools are closing and public gatherings being canceled, while Trump alternates between claiming his chaotic White House has it under airtight control and dismissing it entirely as a Democratic Party hoax. Well, we must be in the Surrealism Corner. I've chosen to put the story about the coronavirus here in the Surrealism Corner because there is something surreal about people being felled by a force so infinitesimally small it can't be seen. Yet viruses are part of the natural world, than which nothing is more real. I got curious about the advice to hand wash and to avoid touching one's face, and also about the virus's lifespan. Here's a few things that I turned up. First, there's some confusion about what airborne means in the general public. Although the virus is airborne, you cannot breathe it in. But when you cough or sneeze, if you do so with your face uncovered, microscopic particles are emitted, which land on surfaces that can contaminate you if you touch them. So avoid that. And don't just avoid touching one's face. Do not touch what infectious disease experts call the T-zone, eyes, nose, and mouth. If you wear the niqab, of course, the total modest dress of Islamist women, you have less of a problem to worry about. These are high-risk areas, the T-zone, although the risk itself depends on various factors, including the type of virus, whether the surface you picked it up from was non-porous, how long ago the virus was left behind, and the surrounding temperature and humidity levels. Some coronaviruses have been known to survive on surfaces for as long as 9 days under ideal conditions, far longer than the flu virus, which typically survives up to 24 hours on hard surfaces under ideal conditions. In general, a virus survives the longest on non-porous surfaces made of metal and plastics, including doorknobs, light switches, banisters and handrails, and elevator buttons. It dies sooner on fabrics or tissues, and once it's on your hand, it begins to lose potency, but it still lives long enough for you to touch your face. Furthermore, your hands are clean only until you touch the next surface, and then they're contaminated again with something, whatever, hopefully not the coronavirus. By the way, experts say you should wash your hands thoroughly for at least 20 seconds, so do a countdown, and you should dry your hands on a clean towel or piece of paper, not the same old towel that's been hanging there for days and you've used before. That would be as stupid as following Trump's advice to go into work if you have a mild case of the virus. Oh my God. But since you cannot wash your hands incessantly, as if you were Lady Macbeth, keeping hand sanitizer nearby or in your pocket or purse if you're outside is a smart thing, and especially do not touch the T-zone. Some experts say it helps to wear glasses and create a barrier to touching your face or your eyes specifically, or to wear gloves or mittens to make you more mindful of not touching your face. Gloves can be contaminated, but viruses don't live long on fabric or leather. And just because you're at home doesn't necessarily mean you're home free. You might have carried contamination inside before you washed your hands, or others might have done so. Therefore, you might wish to spray with disinfectant and wipe down your desk, your telephones, and other such surfaces. You don't want to get all crazy over this, but neither do you want to be infected or infect others. With anything, come to think of it. Here's a short item deserving of long thought. The space around our planet has become exceedingly cluttered. There are more than 2,200 operational satellites. Moreover, it's estimated that there are 34,000 pieces of debris at least 4 inches wide speeding in orbit. Space junk, space garbage. Speaking of space, for the first time in 4 years, NASA is hiring new astronauts. The job application opened last Monday for the Artemis generation of space explorers. The Artemis program's goal is to return to the moon by 2024 and land the first woman there. As the job description notes, extensive travel required. The competition's going to be ferocious. The last time NASA sought astronauts, 18,300 people applied for 14 slots. This time around, the requirements are even stricter. You must be a U.S. citizen and have a bachelor's degree in science, math, or engineering. NASA is also looking for a master's degree in physics, computer, or biological sciences, engineering, or math, or at least a few years of PhD work in one of those fields. If you're a medical doctor, that works too, or if you're enrolled in or a graduate of a test pilot program. So if you or anybody you know has always dreamt of going where no woman has gone before, here's your chance. Spread the word. More and more women are opting out of relationships and finding they prefer to be singletons. In fact, they're celebrating the single life with great glee. As with every feminist issue these days, celebrity actors are joining in. Recently, British actor Emma Watson of Harry Potter fame, now aged 29, told British Vogue magazine, quote, "I'm very happy being single. I call it being self-partnered." She added that at a certain age, quote, "there is suddenly this bloody influx of subliminal messaging. If you haven't built a home, if you do not have a husband, if you do not have a baby, and if you are turning 30 and you're not in some incredibly secure, stable place in your career, or if you're just figuring things out, there's just this incredible amount of anxiety," close quote. She says she solved it by choosing to become single. Psychologists agree that when you're not seeking partnership, you find a relaxed, calm inner space and generally become more comfortable with who you are, since you're not trying to impress or please anyone except your own inner self. This is particularly true for women, who are so intensely socialized to please others. But there's a revolt going on. In the 2012 General Social Survey, more than half of adult Americans reported that getting married is not an experience they consider important to becoming an adult. Meanwhile, on Instagram, more than 12.9 million posts use the hashtag engaged. However, the hashtag single is used more than 17.9 million times, and hashtag single girl is featured in more than 915,000 posts. In 2016, 110.6 million U.S. residents 18 years and older were unmarried, and women accounted for 53.2% of those individuals, according to the Census Bureau. Japanese women have taken this trend to a high social level, staging elaborate weddings complete with white satin wedding gowns, veils, bouquets of flowers, bridesmaids, ceremonies, and receptions for family and friends, all immortalized by photographers. But no groom. They are called selfhood vows, or shorthanded as I marry me, or I pledge myself to myself ceremonies. Since this is a relatively new phenomenon, nobody has tracked such marriages, and there's no statistics on the divorce rate of separating oneself from oneself. But I can't help but find it genuinely touching, this attempted affirmation of self in a culture that still teaches women to cover their faces when they laugh so that their teeth don't show, or for that matter, in any patriarchal society anywhere. Human relationships can be fragile, tensile, corrosive, or precious. But for all of written history, women have effectively been barred from deciding if or when to choose them, and to remain in them, even if that's at the cost of sanity or self. I'm sure this new trend may strike some people as a selfish fad, but I think it's a brave experiment these young women are taking. I've always thought selflessness, a much praised concept in women, was a horrifying word. Heretofore it was only older women who, finding themselves widowed or divorced, suddenly blossomed as they discovered the delights of freedom. To be coupled can be one of the greatest joys of being human. But in other circumstances it can be one of the greatest tragedies. Yet whatever one chooses, and hopefully it is choice and not force, the foundational relationship has to be with oneself. Otherwise, there's no self to choose to share. And last, women's unpaid labor. Ha ha. Did you know that it is worth $10.9 trillion last year? If American women earned minimum wage for the unpaid work we do around the house and caring for relatives, we would have made $1.5 trillion last year. Globally, women would have earned $10.9 trillion. It's been 32 years since 1988, when Marilyn Waring, the New Zealand former parliamentarian, published a book called If Women Counted, with the first feminist analysis of women's work. Finally, social scientists are taking notice. Unpaid labor, what the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development defines as time spent doing routine housework, shopping for necessary household goods, child care, tending to the elderly and other household or non-household members, and other unpaid activities related to household maintenance, remains largely invisible still to economists. It isn't part of GDP calculations, and it rarely factors into other measures of economic growth. The value, however, of this shadow labor is staggering. According to an analysis by Oxfam, $10.9 trillion a year, it exceeds the combined revenue of the 50 largest companies on last year's Fortune Global 500 list, including Walmart, Apple, and Amazon, combined. Beyond surreal. It's time for another short break, but I'll be back directly with a conversation this week with Sarah Macharia from Kenya and from the Global Media Monitoring Project, which you can be a part of. Stay tuned. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And now for the conversation. As I mentioned earlier, my guest this week is Sarah Macharia, who coordinates the Global Media Monitoring Project, which is unique in involving participants ranging from grassroots community organizations to university students and researchers and media practitioners, all of whom participate on a voluntary basis. And every 5 years since 1995, their research has taken the pulse of selected indicators of gender in the news media. And the fifth research in the series was conducted in 2015 by hundreds of volunteers in 114 countries around the world. Sarah herself lives in Kenya. She is a Kenyan, and she is the feminist political economist with a PhD in political science from York University in Toronto. I ask you to forgive the momentary static that occurs a couple of times in the conversation. Long way to go to phone Kenya, but mostly it's loud and clear, and she always is loud and clear. Sarah Macharia. Sarah Macharia, welcome to Women's Media Center Live, all the way from Kenya.
Hello, thank you for having me.
You are the global coordinator of the Global Media Monitoring Project, and it is one fantastic project. Tell us about the project.
Well, the Global Media Monitoring Project, or the GMMP as we refer to it in short, it's a research and advocacy initiative for gender equality in and through the news media. It has been running since 1995, so this year will mark 25 years since it began, and it has two major components. The first is media monitoring research to collect the evidence on the shape and form in hard statistics of gender inequality in the news. The second component is advocacy, which actually has expanded over time to include all actions that apply the findings to advance transformation of media practice into forms that value, respect, and accord equal space to women. This research is actually civil society centered, meaning that it is carried out by tens of thousands of volunteers in more than 100 countries around the world who apply a standard methodology to code or respond to questions on the news. They answer questions about the story, about the people in the story, about the journalists. These are the reporters and presenters delivering those stories. So in short, this is what the GMMP is, and it has been, the research component has been taking place once every 5 years. So this is going to be our sixth monitoring in 2020.
Wow, that's amazing. I will confess to you that although I was very impressed by all the work that you did and that GMMP has done, I went on alert. I'll be perfectly honest. I went on alert when I learned that it was a project of, or it had been born out of, the World Association for Christian Communication, because these days in the United States, there is such a heartbreaking record of fundamentalist right-wing Christian activism, particularly in the global South, that has spread anti-woman propaganda, gay and lesbian propaganda. I mean, it's just a right-wing fundamentalist, and I go automatically on the alert. And then I learned that actually World Association for Christian Communication goes on liberation theology and is the religious left. We hear only about the religious right, and this is the religious left. And the project is independent anyway. So I congratulate you.
Well, thank you very much. And actually, just to clarify, the GMMP actually came out of a conference that was convened by three international communications organizations. One was WAC, the World Association for Christian Communication. Mm-hmm. The second one was the IWTC, the International Women's Tribune Center, that is in New York.
Of course.
And the third one was ISIS Manila, which is also an international feminist communication organization.
Yes, it's been around a long time.
They came up with the idea to hold a one-day global monitoring to understand the role and presence and portrayal and representation of women in the news media. So really, the GMMP is a brainchild of the women who came to this conference.
Among the things that the volunteers in over 100 countries have found is that only 24% of news subjects, people who are interviewed or whom the news is about, are female, and that when women do make the news, it's primarily as stars or celebrities or quote ordinary people, but not as figures of authority. And half the world's population is barely present. In other words, you're finding out the kind of things that the Women's Media Center has been working on for a decade and a half here now in the United States. It's the same all over. We've vanished from the information that the world gets, and this is extremely important work.
Exactly. Just as you mentioned, what's been quite remarkable about the GMMP is the fact that the findings have remained stable over time. So while there's that 24% statistic that we found in 2015 as the proportion of people in the news who are women, that same statistic was found in 2010. And over the period between 1995 to 2015, there was only like a 7-point change in the presence of women in the news media around the world. So really, as in the same way that the Women's Media Center has been finding these statistics in the U.S., we find that this underrepresentation and misrepresentation of women carries across media all across the world.
Yes. Your methodology has been updated and improved with each successive GMMP, and the methodology and research instruments are made freely available to women in other countries in at least 4 languages, the languages being English and what else?
French, Spanish, and Arabic.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Oh, bravo. And it's been taken up. Talk about what happened in Bolivia.
Well, in Bolivia, they have a fantastic way of involving all sectors of society in the media monitoring. Their last monitoring team in 2015 had over 100 volunteers who are from peasant organizations, disability groups, rural community groups, groups in urban areas, university students, a whole cross-section of society. This was remarkable because we hadn't seen something like this before.
Yes, that's very... Go ahead.
Yeah, and in fact, we've seen, of course, the size of the monitoring teams vary from some 10, media monitors to hundreds. So that's a bit of the GMMP. It allows everyone who wants to take part, because, more than simply gathering the data, the GMMP is really an exercise in creating active media audiences. So we encourage broad participation, as many people as would like to volunteer. they're encouraged to take part in it.
This is so wonderful. Yes, another example is the case of the Southern African Media and Gender Institute, SAMGI, that in 2007 adopted your methodology to monitor reportage of HIV/AIDS from a gender lens in the South African news media. And in fact, when I was in South Africa, they, after apartheid ended, they were talking about this at that time. So again, congratulations. Talk about the results being used and all the different ways that they are being used in research and training and literacy education and advocacy. Talk about some of that.
Yes. Well, the second component, remember, I introduced the GMMP as a research and advocacy initiative.
Mm-hmm.
So now that second component on advocacy, it actually combines many ways in which the findings are applied to make change. For example, we use the findings to help create or develop curricula for university and high school students in the UK, for one. And the findings are also applied as a course material in university courses. It's also applied a lot in training, in a lot of training workshops, capacity building events for journalists, for professional journalists who want to learn how to report from a gender perspective or how to apply a gender lens in their practice. So it's used in that way as well. The findings are also used to influence policy. So at the level of the Commission on the Status of Women, that takes place in New York every March.
Of course.
We have used those. Yeah, so we have used those findings to argue for the need to remember media as central for the achievement of gender equality and women's rights, so that media is not left behind when actions to advance gender equality are being enacted.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, if we're left out of media, nothing else counts, because if we're in an information age, and if women are continue to be disappeared, we have to start from scratch all over again, and we can't even get the word out. What is exciting about what you're doing is the thousands of volunteers. It's just extraordinary. If people listening to this program want to be part of that, where do they go? What is the website, or how do they contact GMMP?
Well, our website is www.whomakesthenews.org. Again, www.whomakesthenews.org. And there you'll find information about how to take part. And once anyone contacts us through the contact form on the website, we connect the people to the country coordinators, and the country coordinators find ways to integrate them into their monitoring team. Alternatively, simply send an email to gmnp@workglobal.org, and we will respond right away to put you in touch with the country coordinator in your country.
That means that the news junkies who listen to this program and are obsessed with keeping up with the news can make it an active process as well, not just a passive one, because you can be monitoring at the same time and have a place to deposit your data that will help women and other living creatures, because GMMP has the largest body of statistical data on gender in the news media anywhere. So bravo to you, Sarah, and to GMMP. I know that the Women's Media Center has been working with you and will work with you more in the future. And it's really exciting that the work that you're doing, and we'll be part of it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that.
Take care now, and let's go take over the world media, shall we?
Yes, we shall. Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Time for one more final break, and then I'll be back with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
And so we try to make sense of another tumultuous week with some fighting words. How many times does Black America have to step up and save all the rest of us? They just did it again, first with Representative Jim Clyburn's moving endorsement, and then with a Super Tuesday vote that was strong, unequivocal, practical, sophisticated, and intergenerational, this last against all predictions to the contrary that it would be split, with younger voters opting for Sanders. When you've had to fight so hard and so long for the vote, which is still being suppressed, you take it very seriously. The black vote, while indeed not monolithic, nevertheless this time spoke strategically in one politically highly sophisticated voice, declaring, "We want to win," and dump Trump. Nor was it only in the South, although the signal started there. It was as if African Americans all over the nation were Jim Clyburn's constituency in terms of trust. That's political power. And let's hear it for another group, hallelujah, white, suburban women. We lost them mysteriously in 2016, and the women's movement has focused laser-like on those women, helping to grow their already articulated disgust at Trump's style, language, tweeting, and behavior that they wouldn't tolerate in their own kids, to grow it into a consciousness that connected it with his policies. This time, they were ready, and they spoke too, loud and clear. For the rest, well, personally, for me it breaks down into gripes and gratitudes. The gratitudes are mostly above. The gripes, well, 1. Early voting gone wild. I applaud any attempt to make voting easier and to welcome in more voters, and early voting makes perfect sense in an election with 2 or 3 candidates maximum. But with a primary field as rush hour crowded as the Democrats has been, and the certainty that people will be dropping out at different points, some of them quite late, it can get a bit out of hand. Thousands of voters in states with early voting on Super Tuesday basically lost their votes because they'd already voted for Buttigieg or Klobuchar or even Steyer. We've been so busy surviving the caucus system, crazed caucus systems, and waiting for the actual, much more open and fairer primaries to begin, that few of us thought about the undertow effect of early voting. Along with so much else in our electoral system, this has got to be revisited. We need early voting options, but finer tuned. 2. The money spent. My God, the money. Between Bloomberg and Steyer alone, we could have revamped whole chunks of the public education system, or built 2 new highways, or bridges, or fixed lots of old ones, or relieved all student debt. Good grief, we could have just bought most of Russia. It's broke, bankrupt, all in the hands of the oligarchs, and that would have taken care of that. The people who profited the most and will continue to do so from this and other elections until we change the system are the political advertisement makers. They are rolling in it this year, and they're expecting still more. 3. The tone deafness of both Bloomberg and Sanders, who, although they were always at each other's throats, managed to be almost mirror images of stupidity, regarding the black community at least. Bloomberg did show up at the Selma 55th anniversary of the march across the Pettus Bridge, as did Klobuchar, Buttigieg, Warren, and a warmly welcomed Biden. But Bloomberg looked wretchedly uncomfortable and pained at being so out of his element. At least he was there, though, miserable as he seemed. The Sanders people, I guess assuming black voters were a lost cause, didn't even bother to send their boy. A slap in the face to the civil rights movement and American history itself. How many times can Bernie dismiss race and sex with facile lip service, covering his real attitude toward what he used to more honestly dismiss contemptuously as, quote, identity politics? White male class-focused politics, you understand. They are not identity politics. No, not at all. 4. The most pathetic but funniest news item of the entire Tuesday coverage: that Bloomberg beat Tulsi Gabbard to win in American Samoa. I'm thinking this was American Samoa's way of saying, we want out of being a U.S. colony. Oops, meant territory. 5. The Bloomberg-Sanders mirror image game regarding women. One woman in particular, Elizabeth Warren, although each of them managed to get under even the niceness skin of Amy Klobuchar once or twice, too. Oh, the boys know enough to say all the right things now, but as the late stateswoman and Congresswoman Bella Abzug used to say, we've had the words, now we'd like the music, guys. I'm tempted to return to gratitude for those still in it late candidates who were clearly not going to make it, and so who dropped out and threw their support where they thought it would make a real difference. And it did. The timing was crucial. But frankly, my heart breaks and my teeth grind, because it's no coincidence that most of those candidates who dropped out were female and or men of color. How I miss the intensity of Cory Booker and the righteous indignation of Julian Castro, and especially the fiery passion and sharp intellect of Kamala Harris. Amy Klobuchar's exit and endorsement were graciously done, and when Minnesota voted, it took her advice and confirmed her great home state power. I was moved by the raw emotion in Elizabeth Warren's sidewalk campaign suspension announcement, and especially by her tearful regret that all those little girls with whom she took thousands of selfies would have to wait another 4 years to see a viable candidate for the White House who is female. In the centennial of suffrage for white women, where we all will be besieged by platitudes, there will be no woman heading the ticket of either party. Of course, we shouldn't forget, though it's damned hard to remember, that Tulsi Gabbard is still running, and she is a twofer, a woman of color with South Asian ancestry. The problem is her record. It shows that she doesn't know for certain that she is A, a woman, B, a Democrat, C, militantly homophobic, or sort of sorry she used to be once, maybe sort of, D, suing Hillary Clinton for saying Gabbard was ineffective, and E, doesn't regret voting only present instead of voting to impeach Trump. Kind of merciful to forget. But if Sanders should win the nomination, she might well be his vice presidential running mate choice. They're close, and she endorsed him numerous times. So think of that. But you can't wring your hands and roll up your sleeves at the same time. So I'll close for now with some wise advice that will be totally ignored. To Bernie Sanders, please abide by the Democratic Convention rules you yourself insisted on, sir. To Joe Biden, announce that your running mate and vice presidential choice will be either Kamala Harris or Stacey Abrams. Do it now. To other candidates who are not already in the Senate, for God's sake, run for Senate. This means you, Mayor Pete, and you, Beto, and you, Yang, and even you, Steyer. To Donald Trump, start packing. And to Mike Bloomberg, pour money into exposing Trump with the same avalanche of powerfully professional ads you would have used for yourself. Then, once the election is secure, buy Fox News. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor Regina K. Scully, WMC president and co-executive producer of this program Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.